Thousands of years ago, ancient texts like the Markandeya Purana described a landmass called Jambu Dweep, or Aryavart. Geographically, this territory spanned an immense footprint, stretching from the borders of modern-day Iran all the way down to the Indonesian archipelago. While it rarely existed as a single political state, this massive area shared a deeply integrated culture. Vedic traditions and Buddhist philosophy flowed freely across these lands. At its political peak under emperors like Chandragupta Maurya and Ashoka, a single unified administration covered nearly 50 lakh square kilometers of this territory. Look at a map today, and that ancient unity is entirely gone. That exact same footprint has fractured into roughly 24 fiercely independent sovereign nations. The dissolution of this subcontinent resulted from three distinct historical forces grinding against the borders over thousands of years. On the eastern edge of this sphere, the separation happened quietly. Southeast Asia was never conquered by marching Indian armies. Instead, these regions were woven into the cultural fabric by traveling merchants and spiritual gurus, an ancient form of soft power. You can still see the physical evidence of this soft power. In Cambodia, local folklore and historical records trace the foundation of the early state to Hindu Brahmins, resulting in the classical architecture of sprawling complexes like Angkor Wat. Further south in Indonesia, Hindu cosmology became so deeply integrated that 9th century builders erected the towering Prambanan temple complex, dedicating massive stone shrines directly to Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Even in Vietnam, the ancient Champa kingdom maintained deep ties to this sphere. For centuries, the local population worshipped Shiva, utilized Sanskrit as a foundational language, and built the red brick sanctuaries of My Son. None of these Eastern nations violently rebelled against an Indian empire. As global maritime trade routes slowly shifted and new religions arrived on their shores, their cultural ties simply faded. They drifted away naturally. The western and northern borders tell a much harsher story. Here, ties were severed by the second force of fracture: military conquest and outright annexation. Take modern-day Afghanistan. Known in antiquity as Gandhara, it features heavily in the Mahabharata and was a thriving hub of Buddhism under the Kushan Empire. That native culture was systematically replaced starting in the 7th century, driven by the military campaigns of Arab and Turkic Islamic conquerors. Further west, Iran shares deep Aryan roots with Vedic India. The early Indo-Iranian peoples shared stark linguistic similarities, and their ancient texts reflect parallel trading systems. Arab invasions and the spread of Islam completely overwrote those early cultural connections. To the north, the break happened much more recently. Tibet was a vital hub of Indian-born Buddhism, intimately linked by culture and religion, until it was forcibly absorbed by China in 1950. The political seal on this fracture came in 1954. Under the Panchsheel Agreement, Jawaharlal Nehru's government formally accepted Chinese rule over Tibet, a diplomatic decision that paved the way for the Sino-Indian War of 1962. The immediate human consequence of that annexation was the displacement of Tibet's spiritual leadership, forcing the 14th Dalai Lama into permanent exile within Indian borders. Unlike the gentle cultural drift in the east, the western and northern regions were separated by forced ideological replacement and modern military expansion. The final lines on the map were drawn by the third force, the colonial scalpel. During the 19th and 20th centuries, British administrators systematically dissected what remained of the subcontinent. Through a series of calculated treaties, the British severed regions like Nepal, Bhutan, and Myanmar from the core Indian administrative sphere. These ancient neighbors were formally reclassified into separate buffer states and independent territories to serve colonial strategic interests. The most violent application of this scalpel was the 1947 partition. In creating Pakistan and eventually Bangladesh, centuries of shared civilization, geography, and culture were severed overnight, displacing millions of people in the process. The strict political borders that box India in today are largely the arbitrary inventions of a retreating colonial empire. Today, the concept of Akhand Bharat has evolved. Groups like the RSS champion it as a current political ideology and a dream of future reunification. pushing that ideology creates immediate geopolitical friction. The surrounding nations are highly protective of their sovereignty, making any actual political reunification nearly impossible in the modern era. 24 modern borders represent a permanent political reality. Yet the shared language of Indonesia and the stone-carved architecture of Cambodia stand as proof. Deep cultural history is etched further than any line on a map.